Hello and welcome to another Seth book analysis video. We shall be picking up where we last left off on The Unknown Reality, Volume 2, a Seth book by Jane Roberts. And that is with session 725. So remember, as always, this is an analysis of the book, so I will be stopping to comment from time to time. Other than that, it is intended to be very relaxed and laid back, so I hope you enjoy. Session 725, December 11th, 1974, 9:17 p.m. Wednesday. The regularly scheduled session for last Monday night was not held so that we could rest. Tonight Jane was so relaxed that I didn't expect her to hold a session. Footnote. Jane's relaxation tonight, while not a profound one, was similar to those effects she described in Note 6 for Appendix 19. End of footnote. But at 8:45 she wanted to try, especially since we hadn't done anything on Monday. It might be a short one, though, she said. Maybe Seth will talk about our own things instead of giving dictation, your material on your father, which I received this past Sunday evening, or what you got on your mother this afternoon. Or maybe he'll talk about what I got on your mother the other day, or my strands of consciousness stuff for psychic politics. Jane's material on strands of consciousness had actually developed because of my experience involving my father while I was in an altered state of consciousness. Footnote. Jane originated the phrase strands of consciousness, which she likes very much, some 10 months ago while describing her sleep state reception of multidimensional material from Seth. See Appendix 4 for Volume 1 of Unknown Reality. End of footnote. That episode had upset me to some degree, but Jane's discussion of the subject in politics, plus a few comments Seth made in ESP class last night, helped me put the affair in a more objective light. There's been a definite acceleration in Jane's and my own psychic adventures lately. In fact, we've had trouble keeping up with our experiences, and little time to study them. I am sure of one thing. I'm in contact with my deceased parents in ways that I certainly didn't employ while they were physical creatures, nor did they in relation to me, of course. Yet certainly the use of such inner abilities, or at least an awareness of them, could greatly enhance communication between the members of a quote-unquote living family. Now, a quiet dictation, but Jane's pace was almost fast. Okay. This book is concerned with the nature of the unknown reality and the ways in which it can become known. In this section, therefore, I have outlined various experiments or exercises for the reader. These will certainly lead you to form your own versions of the exercises given, or will open your mind so that spontaneously, in your own way, you become aware of events that were literally invisible to you before. You may find some of your most cherished conceptions to be underlined misconceptions in the light of your new experiences. Since explorations are highly personal, you will most likely begin them from the framework of your current beliefs. Symbols may be utilized, and these may change their meaning for you as you progress. The symbols may evolve, therefore. In the beginning of this work, I quote-unquote warned the reader that here in these sessions we would go beyond the ideas of one God and oneself. Footnote. Here Seth referred to his material in the 687th session for Volume 1. After 1107, quote, I underlined am, saying that the individual self must become consciously aware of underlined far more reality, that it must allow its recognition of identity to expand so that it includes previously unconscious knowledge. To do this, you must understand, again, that man must move beyond the concepts of one God, one self, one body, one world, as these ideas are currently understood. End quote. Also see the preface for Volume 1. End of footnote. I stated that your ideas of personhood would be expanded, As unknown reality is being produced, Rupert and Joseph are having their own experiences and uncovering the nature of the unknown reality as it applies to them. Joseph recently had an experience that disturbed him, simply because it was difficult to interpret even in the light of his understanding about the nature of the self. You cannot explore the nature of reality, hoping to discover its unknown aspects, if you insist that those aspects correspond with the known ones. So Joseph allowed himself some freedom, and then was underlined almost scandalized with the results. His experience appeared to imply that his father's identity had so much mobility and so many possibilities for development that the very underlined idea of identity seemed to lose its boundaries. Footnote. In this 725th session, Seth mentions two of my recent inner experiences and one of Jane's. Each one had to do with strands of consciousness, although in this note I'll stress only the very unsettling one I had with my quote-unquote dead father last Sunday night, December 11th. The event could have been triggered by my internal perception of just a month ago, the day the 719th session was held. In note 4 for that session I described how I'd seen myself as a very old man, and made a quick sketch of that vision. I added that the episode had in turn reminded me of observing my father as he lay dying in February 1971 at the age of 81. In the 719th session itself, Seth remarked that the interior view of myself represented, quote, a quote-unquote precognitive moment in my present life that, obviously, I have yet to encounter. Now, last Sunday evening, as I studied that quote-unquote old drawing of myself, I thought once more of my father in his last days. Then a whole block of information came to me regarding his present non-physical circumstances and quote-unquote plans. I wrote it all down immediately. I called it the quote-unquote Miriam experience, and Jane presents it in chapter 12 of Politics. The material I picked up about my father's psychic intents was at first very bewildering. Hinted at was such a diffusion of consciousness that at the time individuality seemed to have little meaning. For I glimpsed Robert Butts Sr. as he decided to disperse quote-unquote himself into a series of other personalities in both the past and the near future, so that I wondered how, in that melange of identities, my father could possibly know himself. Seth's explanations in ESP class last night and in this evening's session helped clear my mind considerably, though. According to him, consciousness has no difficulty in making such alliances while maintaining continuity of identity, though its vast abilities are certainly almost impossible for us to grasp. At 11:35 tonight, Seth briefly referred to my second recent psychic experience and to Jane's. Both involved more quote-unquote conventional ideas, and both involved perception of my deceased mother in her own non-physical state. Jane's happened on Monday afternoon, December 9th, while mine took place this afternoon. Jane's was especially clear, featuring a communication from Stella Butts, who was seemingly quite quote-unquote herself. It isn't necessary to study those two events in detail here, however. In class yesterday evening, Seth first came through with some very earthy material that's presented as Appendix 24. Then Jane read her notes on strands of consciousness which, I can add later, also found their way into Chapter 12 of Politics. Seth soon returned in class with the following comments. He referred to Jane's ideas mainly, yet as he talked I began to understand my experience with my father and his after-death situation as I perceived it. Quote, there are no ceilings to the self, and no boundaries set about you. There is no place where identity need stop, yours or anyone else's. Now, if you want to rest for a while in the familiar privacy of your self-adopted selfhood, then that is all right. But if you discover paths or quote-unquote strands of consciousness leading from yourself into other realities, then follow them. What selves do you encounter in time? And what makes you think that those selves exist in time as you understand it underlined only? Why does it seem impossible that other strands of consciousness go underlined to you and underlined out from you constantly? A student asked, What's the difference between a strand of consciousness and an identity? That is for you to play with, Seth replied. To play with as you spook out the universe that spooks you out in return. Think of, my dear friend, the tiny web-like positions of the neurons within your skull. If they want to find underlined you, where do they look? Where do they find your identity as apart from their own? Where do they draw the lines of identity? And where do their quote-unquote thoughts break off so that they cannot follow, and yet they follow? That is your answer. It is one of my unanswers, and far more powerful than any other answer could be. And added over a year later, Note 35 for Appendix 18 contains excerpts from the 775th session. See Seth's comments on the patterns of identity formed by consciousness with their quote-unquote particleized and quote-unquote wave-like characteristics. End of footnote. First of all, in your terms, quote-unquote pure identity has no form. You speak of oneself within one body because you are only familiar with one portion of yourself. You suppose that all personhood in one way or another must have an equivalent of a human form, spiritual or otherwise, to quote-unquote inhabit. 934. Identity itself is composed of pure energy. It takes up no space. It takes up no time. I said that there are invisible particles that can appear in more than one place simultaneously. Footnote. Seth meant his CUs, or basic units of consciousness, of course, which he discussed in sessions 682 through 84 in Volume 1. See the 682nd session after 947. Quote, these units can indeed appear in several places at once. End quote. End of footnote. So can identity. Atoms and molecules build blocks of matter, in your terms, even while the atoms and molecules remain separate. The table between Joseph and myself, Jane, in trance, sat with her feet upon our long, narrow coffee table, does not feel invaded by the invisible particles that compose it, for that underlined matter amused. If you will forgive me for that old pun, the atoms and molecules that form the table today did underlined not have anything to do with the table 5 years ago, though the table appeared the same then as now. Pause. In the same way, quite separate identities can merge with others in a give-and-take gestalt, in which the overall intent is as clear as the shape of the table. To some extent, Joseph was perceiving that kind of inner psychic organization. In your terms, the earth at any given time represents the most exquisite physical, spiritual, and psychic cooperation, in which all consciousnesses are related and contribute to the overall reality. Physically, this is somewhat understood. Give us a moment. Then slowly. It is difficult to explain on spiritual and psychic levels without speaking in terms of underlined gradations of identity, for example, but in your terms, even the smallest quote-unquote particle of identity underlined is inviolate. It may underlined grow, develop or expand, change alliances or organizations, and it does combine with others even as cells do. Long pause. Your body does not feel as if you invade it. Your consciousness and its consciousness are merged. Yet, let me say that with the proper inflection. Your consciousness and its consciousness are merged, yet it is composed of the multitudinous individual consciousnesses that form the tiniest physical particles within it. Those particles come and go, yet your body remains itself. What was physically a part of you last year is not today. Physically, you are a different person. Put simply, the stuff of the body is constantly returned to the earth, where it forms again into physical actualization, but always differently. Footnote. See Appendix 24. End of footnote. Long pause, eyes closed. Jane's delivery had slowed considerably. In somewhat the same way, your identity changes constantly, even while you retain your sense of permanence. Underlined, that sense of permanence, underlined, rides upon endless changes. It is actually dependent upon those physical, spiritual, and psychic changes. In your terms, for example, if they did not occur constantly, your body would die. The cells, again, are not simply minute, handy, unseen particles that happen to compose your organs. They also possess consciousnesses of their own. That kind of consciousness unites all physical matter. There is indeed a communication existing that joins all of nature, an inner webwork, so that each part of the earth knows what its other parts are doing. Cells are organizations, ever-changing, forming and unforming. 10 o'clock. Give us a moment. Cells compose natural forms. An identity is not a underlined thing of a certain size or shape that must always appear in one given way. It is a unit of consciousness ever itself and inviolate, while still free to form other organizations, enter other combinations in which all other units also decide to play a part. As there are different shapes to physical objects, then, so identity can take different shapes. And basically those forms, underlined, are far more rich and diverse than the variety of physical objects. All of that was underlined. Long pause. You speak about chromosomes. Correction, you speak about the chromosomes. Your scientists write about heredity, buried and coded in the genes, blueprints for an identity not yet formed. Footnote. In Volume 1, see the definitions of chromosomes and genes in Note 9 for Session 682. End of footnote. But there are psychic blueprints, so to speak, wherein each identity knows of its quote-unquote history, and taking any given line of development, projects that history. Footnote. Seth first discussed his blueprints for reality in Session 696 for Volume 1. Quote, each probability system has its own set of quote-unquote blueprints, clearly defining its freedoms and boundaries, and setting forth the most favorable structures capable of fulfillment. As an individual, you carry within you such a blueprint. The information is knit into the genes and chromosomes, but it exists underlined apart. In the same fashion, the species en masse holds within its vast inner mind such working plans or blueprints. End quote. End of footnote. The potential of such an identity is far greater, however, than can underlined ever be expressed through any physical one-line kind of development, forcefully. Identities, then, do send out quote-unquote strands of consciousness into as many realities as possible, so that all versions of any given identity have the potential to develop in as many ways as possible. You, as you think of yourself, may have trouble following such concepts, just as you would have trouble trying to follow the quote-unquote future reality of the cells within your body at this moment. Long pause. You must understand that in greater terms there is no big or small. There is not a giant identity and a pygmy one. Each identity is inviolate. Each also unites with others while maintaining its individuality and developing its own potential. A mountain exists. It is composed of rocks and trees, grass and hills, and in your terms of time you can look at it, see it as such, give it a name, and ignore its equally independent parts. Without those parts, the mountain would not exist. It is not invaded by the trees or rocks that compose it, and while trees grow and die, the mountain itself, at least in your terms of time, exists despite the changes. It is also underlined dependent upon the changes. In a manner of speaking, your own identities as you think of them are dependent upon the same kinds of living organizations of consciousness. 1021. Let us look at it differently. People who read so-called quote-unquote occult literature may consider me, quote, an old soul, end quote, like a mountain, period. In grand ancient fashion above other more homey village-like souls, I have my own identity, yet that identity is composed of underlined other identities, each independent, as the mountain is composed of its rocks and could not exist without them, even while it rises up so grandly above the plain. My understanding rests upon what I am, as the mountain's height rests upon what it is. I do not feel invaded by the selves or identities that compose me, nor do you underline they feel invaded by me, any more than the trees, rocks, and grass would resent the mountain underlined shape intently, into which they have grown. The top of the mountain can quote-unquote see further, its view takes in the entire countryside. So I can look into your reality, as the top of the mountain can look down to the plain and the village. The mountain peak and the village are equally legitimate. Let us look at this again in another way. Your thinking mind, as you consider it, is the top of underlined your mountain. In certain terms, you can see quote-unquote more than your cells can, though they are also conscious of underlined their realities. Were it not for their lives, you would not be at the top of your psychological mountain. Even the trees at the highest tip of the hillside send sturdy roots into the ground and receive from it nourishment and vitality, and there is a great give and take between the smallest sapling in the foothills and the most ancient pine. No single blade of grass dies, but that it affects the entire mountain. The energy within the grass sinks into the earth, and in your terms is again reborn. Trees, rocks, and grass constantly exchange places as energy changes form, very forcefully, leaning forward, eyes wide and dark. Water rushes down the hillside into the valley, and there is a constant give and take between the village below, say, or the meadows, and the mountain. So there is the same kind of transformation, change, and cooperation between all identities. You can draw the lines where you will for convenience's sake, but each identity retains its individuality and inviolate nature even while it constantly changes. Take your break. 1037. Jane's trance had been excellent, her delivery fast for much of the time. And here I didn't even know if I could have a session, she said. I got most of the mountain thing in images while I was giving it. I think it's a great concept and analogy. The whole thing comes from your father experience, the Miriam thing. Right now I think I'm getting that everything on the face of the earth is related, that your consciousness is in an ant or a rock or a tree, but that we're not used to thinking that way. Footnote. Strange, but recently I visually approached the idea of interrelated consciousnesses in 2 pen and ink drawings for Jane's book of poetry, Dialogues of the Soul and Mortal Self and Time. I incorporated humanoid features on large rocks. Resting in their natural outdoor world, these entities are subject to even the smallest change in their objective weather, but so are we. And might not both rock and human also respond to a uniting psychological weather? I've completed finished art for only 15 of the 40 drawings planned for dialogues, but have done extensive work on many of those remaining. I expect to be through with the whole job late next month, in January. See Note 1 for Session 705. And added 10 months later, the rock drawings are referred to above. Correction. The rock drawings referred to above are reproduced on pages 80 and 115 of Dialogues. End of footnote. Not that one is superior to another, just that we're all connected. That there's some kind of weird familiarity, biologically and psychically, that we've never gotten consciously. What I'm getting at is that your father could do any of the things that you wrote about in Note 4, without invading anything or anyone. It's just that our ideas of personhood and soul make it sound terrible until you get used to those ideas. Gee, Jane said enthusiastically later, I'm glad I decided to have a session. Resume in the same manner at 11:05. Now, trees bear seeds. Some fall nearby. Others are carried by the wind some distances into areas that the tree itself, for all of its height, could not perceive. The tree does not feel less itself because it brings forth such seeds. So identities throw off seeds of themselves in somewhat the same fashion. These may grow up in quite different environments. Their realities in no way threaten the identity of the quote-unquote parent. Identities have free choice, so they will pick their environments or birthplaces. Long pause. Because a tree is physical, physical properties will be involved, and the seeds will mature following certain general principles or characteristics. Atoms and molecules will sometimes form trees. Sometimes they will become parts of couches. They will form people or ants or blades of grass. Yet in each of these ventures they will also retain their own sense of identity. They combine to form cells and organs, and through all of these events they obtain different kinds of experience. Physically speaking, and generally, your body is composed of grasses and ants and rocks and beasts and birds, for in one way or another all biological matter is related. Footnote. See Note 3 for the 687th session in Volume 1. In that note, Jane's poem, Illumination, is especially apropos of Seth's material here. End of footnote. Underlined, in certain terms, through your experience, birds and rocks speak alphabets. Underlined, and certain portions of your own being fly or creep as birds or insects, forming the great gestalt of physical experience. Footnote. See the references in the 718th session to Jane's quote-unquote fly experience of last month, by myself in the opening notes and Note 4, and by Seth near the end of the session. End of footnote. It is fashionable to say, you are what you eat, semicolon, that, for example, you must not eat meat because you are killing the animals, and this is wrong. But in deeper terms, physically and biologically, the animals are born from the body of the earth, which is composed of the corpses of men and women as much as it is of other matter. The animals consume underlined you, then, as often as you consume them, and they are as much a part of your humanity as you are a part of their so-called animal nature. Long pause at 11:21. Then Jane, speaking for Seth, delivered the following material in a most emphatic manner. It was obvious that she was in a deep trance. The constant interchange that exists biologically means that the same physical stuff that composes a man or a woman may be dispersed, and later form a toad, a starfish, a dog, or a flower. It may be distributed into numberless different forms. That arithmetic of consciousness is not annihilated. Footnote. In 1959, some 4.5 years before she began holding these sessions, Jane wrote a little poem about the arithmetic of her own being. She was 30 years old. My heart knows no arithmetic. My heart knows no arithmetic, yet 1 and 1 are 2, and the heart totals parts that whisper sums their fibers through. My brain is slow on calculus, yet its rules apply to every cell my thoughts leap through, and everything I think or do. I never knew equations, but my atoms' chemistry, with precise calculation, add up to me. End of poem, end of footnote. It is multiplied and not divided. Reminiscent within each form is the consciousness of all the other combinations, all of the other alliances, as identity continually forms new creative endeavors and gestalts of relatedness. There is no discrimination, no prejudice. When you eat, you must eliminate through your bowels. That resulting matter eventually returns to the earth, where it helps form all other living things. The quote-unquote dead matter, the residue of a bird, the sloughed off cells, these things are not then used by other birds, though they may be occasionally, but by men and women. There is no rule that says your discarded cellular material can be used only by your own species. Yet in your terms, any identity, no matter how quote-unquote minute, retains itself and its identity through many forms and alliances of organizations. Through such strands of consciousness, all of your world is related. Your own identity sends out strands of itself constantly, then. These mix psychically with other strands, as physically atoms and molecules are interchanged, so there are different organizations of identity in which you play a part. Rupert is connected with me in that manner. He is also connected with any ant in the backyard in the same way. Yet I retain my identity. The ant retains underlined its identity, and Rupert retains underlined his. Footnote. While reading those passages on identity, the reader might keep in mind the subject matter of Appendix 18, the complicated relationships involving Jane, Rupert, and Seth. End of footnote. But one cannot exist without the other two, for in greater terms the reality of any one of the three presupposes the existence of the others. 1135. Give us a moment. Not dictation. All of this should help you understand your own experience involving your father, and the later one with your mother, and, separately, Rupert's with your mother, for Stella Butts was sending out strands of consciousness in the directions that interest her. After giving half a page of material for Jane, Seth closed out the session with this remark. His, Rupert's, students are important, for as he is translating from the library, they are also translating. End of session. A hearty good evening. Thank you, Seth. Good night. End at 11:45 p.m. He said that, Jane told me, laughing, because I have to get something to eat. I'm starved. Seth's reference to the members of ESP class concerned the part many of them have begun playing in helping us answer the mail. With 3 Seth books on the market now, the number of letters Jane receives weekly has increased considerably, and evidently will continue to grow. A couple of months ago, she thought of asking interested students to answer certain letters. The idea is working very well. It's one of those things that seem obvious once conceived. There's also a rather unexpected bonus. Not only is the mail being answered much more quickly, but the students involved are gaining experience in dealing with a variety of intellectual and emotional questions posed by people they've never met. A series of very beneficial challenges has arisen for all concerned. Footnote. But added a few weeks later. The idea, adopted so enthusiastically by so many class members, didn't work out after all. Jane and I came to realize that even her students tired of the unending process of writing letters, even about subjects they're interested in, week after week. Quote, it turned into too much work, end quote, more than one student ruefully admitted. For the flow of letters is constant, nor, we learned, did some of those who wrote Jane relish receiving a reply from someone else. The result of the experiment was that once more we were thrown back upon our own resources. We do what we can. Our latest attempts to handle the mail are described in the final passages of my introductory notes for Volume 1. Seth's most recent letter to the correspondence is presented at the conclusion of these notes. End of footnote. End of session. So that was quite the interesting session. Let's talk about this a little bit before continuing on to the next session. So, just one interesting little thing there, talking about receiving letters back in those days. I mean, I'm pretty sure that people still write letters these days, but of course, today we've got email and social media and all of that, so we probably take that for granted a lot. You know, just think of what it was like 50 years ago or whatever. Let's see, this was 1974, so let's see, can I do math that quickly? Like 45 years ago, right? 45. Anyway, I'm a little out of it as I'm filming this. But yeah, imagine what life was like that many years ago, not getting the convenience we have today of being able to just reply to emails by typing on a keyboard, or even like typing on a phone or a tablet or whatever. Like, we have it so much easier, and we, I think, take that for granted. But another comment I want to make is on what Seth was saying about like people's concerns about eating meat or not eating meat. I think it's funny because what he is presenting with how, like, oh, we're all sort of composed of one another's molecules or whatever, it kind of turns that argument, or I don't know, it presents an interesting challenge or angle to that argument, because for like the two people in the entire world's population who are still not aware, the like debate on whether we should eat meat or not eat meat, like whether we should be meat eaters or vegetarians or even vegans, is huge. I mean, just look some of this stuff up on the internet if you don't believe me. Like, look up YouTube videos even that either promote or discourage vegetarianism, and you will find such intense like debate from both sides. And it's actually an issue that I haven't even entirely necessarily made up my mind on yet, and I don't want to get deep into because I'm not interested in talking about something that could be potentially divisive. Although I will say that currently I eat very little meat myself, and kind of want to keep it that way, but at the same time, I don't know if I could handle not eating any meat at all. But I don't know. I'm not sure what else to say or think about that. I'd have to think about that more, like in regards to Seth's comments on that. Anyway, other than that, I think that's about all I had to say. So, let me take a sip of water and we shall continue. The ice in my water is melted already. I should have grabbed even more, I guess. All right. Session 726, December 16th, 1974, 9:43 p.m., Monday. I'm beginning to get a cluster of images. They're of islands, Jane said at 9:40. I don't know why, but I've been doing things that way lately. Then Seth uses what I get in the material. Okay, I guess I'm about ready. She lit a cigarette. Good evening. Good evening, Seth. Now, dictation, slowly and softly. The unknown reality. It cannot be expressed in the cozy terms of known knowledge, and so you must stretch your own imagination. Underlined, rouse yourself from mental lethargy, and be bold enough to discard old dogmatic comfort blankets. Imagine that you are a small sandy island with softly graded shores. Pause. Some palm trees. Pause. And a haven for traveling birds. Pretend further that you are quite content, though sometimes lonely. A fine fog encircles you, though it does not prevent the sun from shining directly down. You feel quite independent, and you think of the fog as a kind of cocoon that gently shields you from the great expanse of an endless sea. Then, however, you begin to wonder about the other islands that you know exist beyond your vision. Are they like you? Your wondering forms a tiny window in the fog, and you look through. Astonished, you discover that a small coral path unites you with the next island that is glimpsed, shimmering now through the ever-growing window in the mist. Who is to say where you end and the other island begins? As you wonder, more astonished still, you discover other coral paths extending from you in all directions. These lead to further islands. They are all me, you think, though each is very different. One may have no trees at all, and another be the home of a volcano. Some may be filled with soft grasses, innocent of sand. Now this first island is very clever indeed, and so it sends its spirit wandering to the closest counterpart, and says, "You are myself, but without sand or palm trees." Its neighbor responds, "I know. You are me without my towering volcano, ignorant of the thundering magic of flowing lava, calm and rather stupid, emphatically, if the truth be known." The spirits of the two islands join for a journey to a third one, and there they discover a top-heavy land filled to the brim with strange birds and insects, and animals that neither knew at home. The first island says to the third, "You are myself, only unbearably social. How can you stand to nurture so many different kinds of life?" The second island spirit says also to the third, "You are myself, only my excitement, my joy and beauty are concentrated in the magic of my volcano, and you instead stand for the twittering excitement of diverse species, birds and animals and insects, that flow in far less grandiose fashion across the slopes of your uneasy land." Pause. The third island, startled, replies, "I am myself, and you must be imperfect versions of underlined my reality. I would no more be a dull island of only sand and palms, or a neurotic landscape of burning lava, any more than I would be a snail. My life is underlined far the better, and you two are only poor shadowy counterparts of me." Pause at 10:09. The first island responds in our hypothetical dialogue, "I suspect," suddenly louder, "that each of us is quite correct. And more, I wonder if we are really islands at all." The second island says, "Suppose my spirit visits your island for a while to discover what it is like to possess palm trees, a few birds, and a tranquil shore. I will give up my volcano for a while and try to make an honest evaluation, if you will in turn come to my land and promise to view it without prejudice. Perhaps then you will understand the great majesty and explosive power of underlined my exotic world." The third island says, "I am myself too busy for such nonsense. The many species that roam my domain demand my attention, and if you two want to exchange your realities, that is fine, but leave me out of it, please." The spirit of the first island visits the second one, and finds itself amazed. It feels an ever-thrusting power rushing up from beneath that erupts in always changing form, yet it is always itself, comparing its experience to what it has known. When the volcano itself, ceaselessly erupting, wishes for peace, the spirit of the first island thinks of its own quiet home shores. The volcano learns a new lesson. It can direct its power in whatever way it chooses, shooting upward or lying quietly. It can indeed be dormant and dream for centuries. Slowly now. It can, if it chooses, allow soft sands to lie gracefully upon its cooling expanse. In the meantime, the spirit of that volcanic island is visiting the first island, and finds itself enchanted by the still waters that lap against the shore, the gentle birds, and the few palm trees. However, it seems that the palm trees and the birds in the sand have dreamed for centuries. Footnote. Seth's statement here is reminiscent of some of his material on moment points. See Note 11 for Appendix 12. End of footnote. One day a bird flies out further from that first island than ever before, to another one, and comes back with a strange seed that falls from its beak. The seed grows. From it springs a completely new and unknown species of plant, as far as the island is concerned, and the plant in turn brings forth flowers with pollen, fruits, and scents, spelled, that have a different kind of creativity that is still its own. The spirit of the second island, then, brings forth elements in the first island that were not active earlier, but it becomes homesick, and so it finally returns to its own land. Heartily, what a transformation! Its volcano, it finds, now gives birth to soil and pollen. Its excitement roused in a million different ways. It meets the spirit of the first island that has been living there, and says, "What a change! I would like a still more spectacular display. The flowers are not nearly colorful or wild enough. It is, if you will forgive me, too underlined well tamed. Yet all in all you've done wonders. Now, however, I'd like a cultural interchange with others still unknown, and if you don't mind, I wish you'd go home," whispering, "This is, after all, me and my land." The spirit of Island 1 says, "I quite enjoyed my venture, and I've learned that the great explosive thrusts of creativity are good. But oh, I yearn for my own quiet, undisturbed shores, and so if you don't care, I think I'll return there." And so it does, to find a land in some ways transformed. The sands still lie glittering, but the fog and mists are gone. The beloved birds have multiplied, and there is in the old familiar sameness a new, muted, but delightful refrain, new species in keeping with the old, but more vigorous. The spirit of Island 1 realizes that it would find the old conditions quite boring now, and the new alterations fill it with pleasing excitement and challenge. What a delightful interchange! For the spirit is convinced that it definitely improved the conditions of Island 2, and there is no doubt that the spirit of the second island improved Island 1 beyond degree. 1039. In the meantime, Island 3's spirit has been thinking. The spirits of Island 1 and 2 did not appeal to it, or to him or her, in any of these cases if you prefer, at all. It was determined to retain its own identity. Yet it too has become lonely, and it has seen endless coral paths reaching out from itself. Its spirit followed one such path and came upon a desert island upon which nothing grew. Figuratively, its image was appalled. "How can you stand such barrenness?" it calls to the spirit of this fourth island. That island spirit responds, "Even the vigor of your questions underlined sickens me. I sense that you come from a land so overcrowded and tumultuous that it makes my sands blanch even further, and the knuckles of my rocks turn white." Island 3's spirit says, "You are myself, utterly devoid of feeling, dead and barren." The spirit of the desert island replies, "I am myself. You must be some counterpart, drunken with sensation, not realizing the purity of my own stripped down nothingness." The two confront each other sideways, for neither can look in the other's eyes. What opposites, what contrasts, what fascinations! So they strike a bargain. The spirit of the desert island says, "You are all wrong. I will go to your land and prove it, and you can stay here and partake of the joys of my peaceful existence, and, I hope, learn the value of austerity." So the spirit of Island 4 journeys to that other reality, where all kinds of life underlined swarm over shore and mountain, and the spirit of the third island visits a world of such peace that all motion seems stilled. What peace! Yet in the peace, what underlined power! And so little by little cacti grow there where there were none, delicate buds opening, filled with water. The spirit of the third island immediately begins to transform the desert island. Great changes appear, and showers of power, quick bursts of rain, explosive inundations of energy. In the meantime, the spirit of the desert island is almost overwhelmed by the teeming life forms on Island 3, so next it visits the volcanic one, and when the volcano becomes frightened of its own energy, the spirit of the desert island says, "Peace. It is all right to sleep, all right to dream. You do not need to be so worried for your energy. It can flow swiftly or slowly, in surges of dreams that take ages. Do as you will." So the volcano throws its energy into the formation of still more new species, while the desert spirit sings its calmness through their tissues. But this new life confounds it also, and it yearns to return home to its old quietude. Underlined there, the spirit of the third island has quickened the desert's abilities so that it blooms with muted flowers not present before. The two spirits meet. Each island is changed. We are counterparts, each of the other, yet inviolate. And the spirit of the volcanic island says to the spirit of the first island, "My volcano knows, now, how best to use its energy. It can shoot into the heavens in great displays, or creep into the tiny crevices of earth, equally powerful." And the spirit of the first island responds, "You have taught my island that life is not something to be afraid of, though still it is translated in my own familiar gentle terms." This is the end of our analogy. The spirit of each of the 4 islands was itself intact, and the interchanges were chosen. You are not islands unto yourselves, except when you choose to be. Each counterpart views reality from its own viewpoint, and there is never any invasion. Take your break. 1104. I knew we weren't going to get a break until we finished that goddamn analogy. Jane laughed after she'd come out of a good trance. I do think we're going to lose readers along the way, though. This book's getting too hard to follow. I also think it's going to be in 2 volumes. I haven't had the guts to see how much material we've gotten so far. I mean, I think the Seth books in general are fairly challenging to decipher completely and totally. But I will say, yeah, of all the Seth books I've read, and I've read like 6 of them, I think it's 6. This one seems to be one of the most, I don't know, not necessarily confounding, but like it just like branches into all these different areas, it seems. But I think Seth intended that, basically, based on comments he's made throughout this book. But just like the book after this, The Nature of the Psyche, which I also plan on analyzing once we get through this one, week by week. From what I recall of it, it's overall more coherent, and it sort of sticks with the theme of the nature of the psyche, although Seth, of course, explains and expresses that in many, many, many different ways. But it still has that overall like underlying theme, at least from what I recall. Although I guess you could argue about this book that it's like many, many, many different expressions of familiarizing the reader with the unknown reality, making the unknown reality known. Nor have I checked up on Unknown Reality's bulk. This was the second time in 3 weeks that Jane had mentioned a 2-volume work. See the opening notes for the 721st session. I wondered aloud whether she might be getting herself used to such an idea. I added that I didn't think she need worry about readers following Seth's material, that certainly many others are just as curious as we are about where Unknown Reality is going. An aside, Jane said that toward the end of her delivery she'd been bothered by traffic noise. It was a warm if snowy night, and we had a kitchen window open for fresh air. All through her delivery I'd been aware of the traffic ceaselessly negotiating the intersection just west of quote-unquote our apartment house, of course, and had asked her to repeat a number of words. We do intend to move out of our 2 apartments early next year, as soon as I finish the illustrations for Jane's dialogues. That is, we're going to start looking for a house we can buy. The Seth material to come is presented for these reasons. 1. It not only incorporates Seth's quote-unquote island analogy, but Jane's and his information in the last 725th session on strands of consciousness. 2. We think that many readers can more easily relate to quote-unquote personalized data. 3. The material on my parents reaches back to the first 2 sessions, 679 through 80, in, added later, Volume 1 of Unknown Reality. 4. The counterpart references are a good example of how Seth weaves such concepts into a discussion. 5. I think the application of tonight's material to Jane's and me... I think the application of tonight's material to Jane and me is neatly summarized in the last paragraph of the session. 6. At the same time, that paragraph contains very challenging ideas. They strongly remind me of the Miriam material I obtained about my father last week. See the last session with its note 4. Resume in a fast manner at 11:40. This is not dictation, but in terms of our analogy, some island spirits are gamblers. 5th house. So you and Rupert are gamblers. You gambled above all that your instincts would lead you in the proper direction, and that you would, quote-unquote, win out despite the, quote-unquote, odds as you understood them. Footnote. See the opening notes for the 713th session. End of footnote. You are willing counterparts, see the 721st session, of each other, and have been in your terms before, each playing out quote-unquote opposite aspects of each other, yet merging for common purposes and goals. So in one century, you were Nabine, and Rupert was indeed the quote-unquote prostitute priestess. And so did you challenge each other, as in different ways you do now, with tendencies that underlined appear to be opposites, but are instead different ways of approaching the same kind of challenge. Footnote. For material and references concerning my Nabine life in the 1st century AD, see section 721 with notes 9 and 12. Seth's remark here that, quote, Rupert was indeed the quote-unquote prostitute priestess, end quote, concerns unpublished material we plan to eventually study in depth. End of footnote. If you could understand, it would help in many areas you do not as yet suspect. To me, underlined, you viewed aspects, counterparts of your father's reality. That reality invades no other. As in the analogy given this evening, the spirit of no island invaded any other, but looked momentarily and with permission through another's picture of reality. Your mother and father are alive, as are Rupert's parents, but their realities are not pinpointed to any given island, and they are forming alliances, but always from the standpoints of their own unique identities. Footnote. Earlier in this decade of our camouflage reality, all 4 of our parents died within a period of less than 3 years. In Volume 1 of Unknown Reality, see Note 2 for Session 680, and the notes at the beginning of the 696th session. End of footnote. Your own private identities do not need fences. They are themselves. They can combine and unite with others, yet retain their uniqueness and experience. Only your concepts limit your understanding of that prime freedom. One strand of your mother's consciousness, that one involved with you, is intertwined with your reality because of underlined her interest in homes. Footnote. In Volume 1, Seth described the role a non-physical Stella Butts played in Jane's and my house hunting activities in Sayre, Pennsylvania, last April. See the 693rd session with notes. End of footnote. Another strand of hers is involved because of her interest in families, and hence with the children of your 2 brothers, Lyndon and Richard. Now in a underlined way, your mother and Rupert were counterparts, for Rupert lives in a trust of individual abilities toward which your mother yearned, and Rupert gives a love to you which your mother yearned to give, yet while retaining her identity to a man. Your mother understood love's purpose and felt its presence in Rupert, and at the same time she was actually annoyed when she felt that you were not following your commercial, artistic ability through, despite her surface misunderstandings of it. Footnote. From her viewpoint, my mother was, indeed, quite baffled when I turned away from a well-paying career in commercial art toward a very risky one in quote-unquote fine art or painting. The year was 1953, and I just met Jane. My mother was 61 years old, I was 34, and Jane was 24. See the few additional details in Note 10 for the 679th session in Volume 1. End of footnote. She identified with you to some extent, and to some unrecognized degree was, quote-unquote, only masculine now in her understanding of power. I hope you will recognize what I mean, but in the light of her understanding at the time, children were to be used as power, as a man might use weapons. Footnote. And at various times through my early years, I understood how my mother used me and my 2 brothers as quote-unquote weapons, or tools or objects against my father. Weapons, perhaps, is too strong a word, I think now, for I don't remember my mother blatantly encouraging, quote-unquote, her children to defy their father, yet we would often end up being on her side. As I grew up, I came to feel that my father was both strongly surprised and disappointed by the wife and children he'd chosen to be involved with. I'd like to add that Seth's material tonight on the Butts family situation is, if brief, very acute. End of footnote. Yeah, I believe that's what Teal Swan calls triangulating, or it sounds like that's more or less, or at the very least somewhat, what's being described there. Just this often rampant and rather negative, if not outright toxic, relationship manipulation technique, where basically there's three people and one of them gets closer to another one by pushing the other away. Like, say that you are person A, and then we have person B and person C. So you as person A go up to person B and say, person C is just really messed up in this way and this way and this way and that way, don't you think? And so you are essentially drawing person B closer, you're pulling person B closer to you by pushing person C further away from you. And then person C is also sort of the victim of this manipulation technique, as much as you could even argue that person B is, because if you're using manipulation, how do I say this, negatively or with intent of, let's say, playing some kind of zero-sum game, then you are in fact not doing person B any favors, or not contributing really positively to person B overall, although you might be contributing some level positively, or contributing positively on some level to them, because at least you are pulling them closer through this strategy, but it's still a toxic strategy, basically. And why am I talking about this, sort of going almost on a little tangent here, even in my, half awake state right now? Because it's freaking important, This is 2019, and these are the kinds of challenges that we face today in the human race when it comes to relationships, which, by the way, relationships are pretty much everything. So I'm mentioning it because it's important. Here's the thing. Like, we as a species, it's like people don't fucking get this. We need to really become intellectually familiar with relationships and relationship dynamics. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about relationships of all kinds. Friends, family, workplace, acquaintances, from mere acquaintances to your lover or life partner, whatever. We need to become intellectually, structurally familiar with relationships, toxic relationship patterns, and stuff like that, because it is through becoming familiar with them that you gain power over them. If you are unfamiliar of them, if you are ignorant of them, then you are so much more susceptible to them, and you can so much more easily fall into them, and then you become a victim of them. You can become a victim of a zero-sum game. You can become a victim of triangulation. You can become a victim of someone manipulating you in some very negative way, or mistreating you, or abusing you, gaslighting you, invalidating you, and you might not even realize it. You might not even realize it. You might not even realize that you're being abused. So think about that. And it's the awareness. It's the awareness of what abuse actually is that then allows you to recognize it, notice it, and call it out when you experience it and say, hey, that's not all right. I'm not taking it anymore. That's another thing I would strongly advise people is to, let's say, how do I put this nicely? Like, get some backbone and stop taking things, stop putting up with violation of your boundaries, stop tolerating unacceptable abuse, and get mad, get angry, and say, we're not taking it anymore, or I'm not taking it anymore, And then a lot of people, especially in spiritual circles, will criticize what I'm saying right now and say, oh, no, you shouldn't get angry. That's too negative. And it's like, no offense, but that is a highly limited viewpoint. Anger can be one of the most life-giving, positive things in the right context. And right as I said that, I looked at the timer as I'm filming here, and it said 1:11:11. So I guess the universe agrees with me. Or at least my higher self does or something. I guess they're all kind of the same. Whatever. The point is, even those who are primarily advocates of positive thinking and that sort of thing will often agree with me on this, that if you're like really depressed or feeling extremely powerless, that anger just might be the breath of life that it takes to get you out of that. And when we're talking on an actual like vibrational level, anger is less resistant than depression or powerlessness or grief or feeling like a victim, that sort of thing. So yes, like anger happens for a reason. I could talk about this all day. Anyway, this is kind of turning into a whole different thing now. So I think I've said enough about that for now. So let's just continue. Stella Butts changed and grew, but underlined in certain terms, she was the masculine center of the family, emotions or not, the aggressive one. And speaking conventionally now, your father, Robert Sr., accepted the more passive creative role. This has meaning in terms of your unpublished information involving the masculine and feminine aspects that united and separated your parents. Footnote. Related material about my parents that has been published can be found in Volume 1. See Note 9 for the 679th session, and Notes 2 and 3 for the 680th session. End of footnote. Your father would have been more quote-unquote comfortable as a woman, and she as a male. Yet for their own purposes, they each chose to experience the other side of the coin, so to speak. This will make more sense to you later. I think it's very good information. Consciousness is not limited. Identities can mix and merge while retaining their inviolate nature and memories. This is all for now, but again, later, you will see where it relates, and how you can disperse your own characteristics into another and they can disperse theirs into you, with your consent and theirs, to form new aspects of reality and to cast new light on combined purposes and challenges. End of session. Okay. And a fond good evening. Thank you, Seth. 12:01 a.m. All right, that is indeed the end of that session. And by the way, in case it wasn't obvious, maybe I should have pointed this out. That was Rob saying to Seth, I think it's very good information. Just to be clear about that. So, all right. Next time will be quite the monumental time because that is when we will reach section 6, which is entitled Reincarnation and Counterparts, the quote-unquote past seen through the mosaics of consciousness. How exciting. So I'm going to give a bit of a preview of what the upcoming sessions will be about for next time. Then I'll have some closing comments, and that'll be it. So next time we resume with session 727, and hang on, let me find what that will be about so you know what to look forward to next time. Session 727, Reincarnational Selves, Counterparts, and Time, the Mountain Analogy, the Fetus, the Future, History, and Probabilities. Sounds very fascinating. And then Session 728, Precognition as a Stimulus to Growth, the Varieties of Time within 1 year. All right. Since we usually get to, usually it's 2 sessions per video, we shall, this freaking thing does not want to cooperate. Give me a moment, as Seth would say. We shall leave it at that, is what I was going to say. All right, so we'll be on session 727, section 6 of the book. Wow. And yet we still have more than half the book remaining, although that's including the appendix material, which seems to be quite huge in this book. So in terms of the main portion of the Unknown Reality, Volume 2, we're probably halfway, or maybe even more than halfway through it at this point, actually. So yeah, we're getting there. All right, so at this point, just gonna make a few personal comments, updates to my personal life for those who are interested. Maybe some are, maybe some aren't. So if you aren't interested, that's fine. You can just click off of this video now. So if that's the case, I want to thank you for watching. Thanks to everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it informative. I know I didn't really comment as much tonight, but you know that's just the case from time to time. Actually, somewhat often, I think, with this book, especially since I'm reading it for the first time as I'm doing these videos, unlike the other ones which I had read prior to it. So, you know, sometimes I have more things to say than others, depending on what Seth brings up. But anyway, yes, thank you so much for watching. Now, a little personal life update for those who are curious about it. I want to announce that I did just like a couple days ago from filming this. Let's see, this is October 11th, Friday. So just 3 days ago, I finally faced my fear of getting a blood test so that we could finally figure out the things regarding my heart, you know, like testing like thyroid levels and electrolyte things and all of that stuff that like I don't really understand fully. But I finally did that. Let's see. It was my left arm. You can't really, you know, I think the little puncture wound is healed over by now, but I finally did that. I'm going to be going over those results with the doctor on Monday and probably getting put on medication. And I almost wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it, because of the intensity of my condition. So I'm very much looking forward to that. In the meantime, if you couldn't tell during this video, you know, I'm very tired, it's very hard for me to focus compared to, you know, how it used to be. I feel almost slightly incoherent at times, or somewhat incoherent. I mean, I even had coffee today, which I've had to cut down on again, but I had it today for the first time in, I don't know, like almost a week or something, or maybe it has been a week. I can't even remember. And even with how much that energized me, I still found myself getting really sleepy during this video. So it's very necessary, I think, to get that blood test. And basically why as terrified of it as I was, the reason that I eventually resorted to it was because basically with everything I was doing, all the spiritual work, all the eating healthy, all of the other like conventional medical things that were able to be done, the tests on me, the medication, the other medications that could be administered, it still wasn't enough. And I still just kept feeling worse and worse and worse. And I basically I came to the conclusion / realization / decision that I just can't live this way anymore. Like I can't let my health just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And so now, don't get me wrong, I still firmly believe, I almost want to say I know, but I guess I should say I believe that what Seth says is indeed correct. What Seth and others say is indeed correct, that our beliefs form reality. However, I also know, and this I do know, that I have a huge amount of resistance within me as a result of the trauma and abuse that I've experienced for virtually all of my life. And I cannot authentically just release that overnight, I can't have just like a sort of tower card experience, sudden awakening, and release all of that overnight and just suddenly be like enlightened, I mean, maybe I could, but if it's going to happen, it hasn't happened yet. So basically with all of that, plus just things getting worse, I concluded, well, like I've said before, I'm not explicitly against conventional medicine. I'm not. In fact, more and more what I think about all of this is, I guess, kind of like, to bring her up yet again, what Teal Swan said recently, I think integrated medicine is ideal. Let's let our ideal, or what we strive for, or at least this is my opinion anyway, and for those who want to do this, I'm not trying to make anyone do anything here, be to have both someone from an alternative medicine sort of background and a conventional medicine sort of background, Let's unite both the spiritual and the scientific. Now, a lot of people still don't want to do that, I understand, but, well, it's what I want to do. Furthermore, however, wow, I actually have a lot to say about all this. Furthermore, I've also kind of decided that at this point, in much simpler terms, it's just fucking ridiculous at this point. Like, I've got bigger fish to fry, honestly. I've got much bigger battles to fight than worrying about potentially, like, ever so slightly compromising my principles by resorting oh so strongly to conventional medicine rather than trying to purely do it through the spiritual work or whatever. Like, I don't know. I even question that viewpoint entirely now, basically. So maybe my own viewpoint has evolved a little bit throughout, this past year and experiencing all this crap with my health. Whereas like now I think, well, it probably is best to go for an integrated state of affairs, where we consult both alternative medicine and someone from a scientific, medical, conventional, clinical background. But again, the larger issue for me is just that I've got bigger fish to fry. Like, I don't really care anymore. And actually, let me say this also. Another aspect of me really, really, really likes the scientific viewpoint and likes sticking with that even above the spiritual. Now, again, this is just one aspect of me, but still, this is very much an aspect of me. And the reason that this aspect of me likes the scientific viewpoint so much and likes science so much is because it sees science as, in and of itself, defiant. Because think about it. If you can use scientific abilities to sort of solve a problem or a challenge that you cannot figure out how to solve otherwise or whatever, or just if you can just use it to solve a challenge, period, then you are in fact, in a way, defying that challenge, Because sometimes, here's a piece of authenticity. Sometimes, as spiritual as I am, I get kind of sick of being told all the time, oh, you have to, like, if you're not, if you're not okay in some way, it's a belief within you that's causing it. Like, oh, you've got to convince yourself of your well-being and blah, 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 blah. I get kind of sick of it, and I think, you know what? There are many aspects of me that do prefer to do this scientifically. And so I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm rambling right now. Like, really, I'm not, at least in my own mind. I'm just trying to convey this as accurately as possible because it's very nuanced. But, yeah. So, bottom line is, at this point, I don't really give a fuck. I'm going to utilize modern medical science and the benefits of that to the fullest extent possible under my conditions, which at this point, the only real limitation of that would be that if I ever have to get a blood test again, like if it's something that's extremely unlikely, if it's a very low risk sort of thing, I may decline to get it since it is still very scary. But now that I've gotten one 3 days ago, like, yes, it was uncomfortable, but I think basically it's something I can handle, After all the pain and trauma and fucking abuse that I've been through, like, all my life, and especially, like, having to sort of confront that within myself this past year and really deal with that shit in ways that I've never really had to deal with it before. It's almost like a blood test sort of pales in comparison at this point. The fears surrounding that. It's like, what the fuck ever. Just go ahead and take the freaking blood from my arm. I don't give a shit. So at this point, any necessary test or procedure like that, I guess I'll be getting. Anyway, what I also wanted to say about that, though, is I'm just really looking forward to hopefully getting on some medication for my thyroid or for whatever's wrong with me. Like, I've been living with this shit for 11 years. Yes, this is the first time that my blood's actually getting tested, and so, well, first time it's getting tested for, like, thyroid issues and stuff potentially related to my heart. So this is the first time I'll actually know for sure, so I don't actually technically know for sure yet, but thing is, I've been living with this for 11 fucking years. I've done my research. I'm virtually certain that I have a thyroid disorder / issue. I'm virtually certain that it's hyperthyroidism. I'm virtually certain that it used to be hypothyroidism. And I'm also virtually certain, therefore, that when I see the doctor on Monday, he's going to put me on thyroid medication. Haven't really looked up thyroid medication yet, like what different kinds there are and stuff like that, but whatever it is that I need, that the doctor orders. So the point is, I'm looking forward to that because I'm looking forward to hopefully finally fucking feeling better because, like I said, I have been feeling just not good at all. My energy levels are so freaking low recently. I don't even know how I got myself on Tuesday to go get the blood test. I guess I just somehow was able to do it. I don't know. Maybe I was running on adrenaline. Maybe that's why I've been like extra tired seemingly ever since, but it's also this condition. I was tired as hell before, but basically, I mean, like when I get passionate about something, like right now, I get fired up about something that gives me energy, but it's just like kind of running on the energy of passion, you know? And like when I've been thinking about other things recently that have been pissing me off, like if any of you saw my recent live stream, then you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, then just wait. I'll probably have more information on that in the future when it's appropriate. But like if I get angry about something, for example, yes, that'll energize the hell out of me even under this current condition, but it's like I'm still running on anger, you know, I'm still running on like emotion. It's not exactly natural energy. And even right now, again, I've had coffee today. Like I'm largely running on caffeine and passion right now, I guess. And then tomorrow I'll be back to being super tired. So basically, you know, in recent days, I don't even know how many days at this point. I'd have to go back and look, but I haven't been doing any work because I've been too tired. I haven't been working out as much, you know. Um, so I've been like, well, and then I even thought to myself, well, why should I? I'm finally gonna get this shit corrected after all these years, starting on Monday, and of course it takes time for the medication to build up in your system and everything, but it's like, why should I push myself hard right now when literally just like another week or so and I should at least theoretically start to feel a lot better. You know what I mean? So it's like sorry, not sorry, but I'm going to be taking it easy for now. And only working when I really feel up to it. Well, quote unquote working, you know. Like this stuff is fun. It's all about following my excitement for me, but you know, making videos is what I'm referring to as working. It's just easier to say that than other things. I don't know, whatever. It is kind of like working though. If I had a job or a career, this would be it. So maybe it sort of is. I don't know, whatever. But so I'm pretty much just taking it easy for the most part for now and just kind of waiting this out, which I guess is kind of strangely nice in a way because it gives me an excuse to indulge in like entertainment and shit like that more. But at the same time, I don't like it because I like being productive. Like I'm still trying to at least get some reading done and stuff like that. I'm still studying tarot and astrology every day as always. I'm making sure to have at least some minimum level of productivity, even if I have to be physically incapacitated for now. But yeah, just wait. I'm excited about it though. I'm thinking, well, I did look this up about thyroid medication, and it was basically saying depending on the various factors, it can take anywhere from like a couple days to a couple weeks to really start to kick in, and then up to like a couple months for everything to really like get back to normal. So I'm hoping that after like a couple of days, I start to feel a little bit better and start feeling more energized and stuff like that. Because if I do, well, you can guarantee I'm going to be productive as hell, you know. See, here's the thing, you guys, in case this isn't obvious about me by now, I'm a Capricorn, all right? I love to work. Okay, Capricorn is the worker bee, indeed, of the zodiac. I love to work. I want to work. I want to be productive like crazy. I'd probably work almost all day, every day if I could. It's just having enough physical energy to do it. So if by finally getting this shit taken care of, if my health can return to a normal state or like almost normal or whatever, and I have enough energy, then you better believe I'm going to be productive as freaking hell from that point forward. And hopefully that can, I guess, solve and resolve many things. So anyway, that's basically my little rant that I wanted to go on, rant/personal life update for those who are interested, because why not, I guess. I figure I might as well throw them in at the end of these videos for those who are interested in hearing about that stuff, because I guess I like adding a bit of a personal touch to things on this channel, you know. I don't know. I don't like it being purely about like my work and stuff like that. I like giving it a little personal touch, but only for those who are interested anyway. I don't want to ramble about that though. So is there anything else I wanted to say before concluding this? Oh, just that on the day I'm filming this, October 11th, 2019, Lacuna Coil's new album, Black Anima, came out, and it's absolutely amazing. So if you like metal, especially if you like symphonic / melodic / gothic metal, definitely check out their new album, and please support this band. They so deserve it, in my opinion. Lacuna Coil, Black Anima, buy their new album if you would like to. And also, even if their new album is like extra heavy, so even if you like just like really heavy music, I guess, if you like maybe not even so much melodic metal, but more like intense or hardcore metal, yeah, definitely check that out. They deserve all the support they can get, in my opinion. All right, so I think that's all the personal shit I have to update you guys with. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope again that you enjoyed the Seth material that we went over, and I look forward to seeing you in our next Seth analysis video. Have a great night, and bye for now.